At 2 a.m., Prince was supposed to be home. Instead, he stood in the shadows of Paisley Park watching a janitor dance like nobody was watching, because nobody was, except him. The building was empty. The lights were off. And what happened in the next 3 hours would create music nobody knew existed, until 20 years later, the 14th of September, 1991. Paisley Park, Chanhassen, Minnesota. The concert had ended hours ago. 5,000 fans had screamed themselves hoarse during Prince's Diamonds and Pearls tour warm-up show. The crew had packed up. The band had gone home. The building should have been silent, but Prince had forgotten his notebook, the purple one where he wrote lyrics and chord progressions at 3 a.m. when inspiration struck. He drove back to Paisley Park, let himself in through the side entrance, and headed toward his private studio. That is when he heard it, music. Faint but unmistakable, coming from the main stage. Prince stopped walking, listened. It was Cream, one of his newer songs, not even released yet. Someone was playing it in his building, on his stage. At 2 a.m., his first thought was security breach. His second thought was anger, but as he moved quietly toward the stage entrance, he heard something else, footsteps, rhythmic, precise. Someone was dancing. Prince peered through the stage door, and what he saw stopped him cold. The janitor's name was Carlos Rivera, 42 years old. Originally from the Bronx, moved to Minneapolis 10 years ago for a fresh start. He'd been working nights at Paisley Park for 6 months, mopping floors, emptying trash, cleaning bathrooms. Nobody really noticed him. That was fine. Carlos preferred it that way. But Carlos had a secret. Before Minneapolis, before the night shift, before life knocked him down so many times he stopped counting, Carlos had been a dancer. Not professionally. He'd never made it that far. But in his 20s he danced in clubs, at block parties, anywhere there was music and space to move. Dancing was the only time Carlos felt like himself, like he mattered. Then life happened, injuries, bills, responsibilities. Dancing became a memory, something he did alone in his apartment when nobody could see. Except tonight. After cleaning the main stage, Carlos had found a pair of headphones left behind by one of the sound techs, and plugged into those headphones was a Walkman. Curious, Carlos pressed play. Cream poured into his ears. He'd heard Prince rehearse it earlier that week, the funky bass line, the falsetto vocals, the rhythm that made your body want to move even if your mind said no. Carlos looked around. The building was empty. Everyone had gone home hours ago. The stage was dark except for a single work light he'd left on for cleaning. He couldn't help himself. Carlos stepped onto Prince's stage, closed his eyes, and started to move. Prince watched from the shadows for a full minute. The janitor, he'd seen him around but never learned his name, moved with a fluidity that couldn't be taught. Self-taught, probably raw. Unpolished in some ways, but authentic in a way that professional dancers sometimes lost. Carlos did a spin, a slide, a freeze. His body remembered choreography his mind thought it had forgotten. He wasn't just dancing. He was telling a story with his body about joy and pain and survival and freedom. Prince had seen thousands of dancers, hired hundreds, choreographed routines with the best in the business. But there was something about watching this man dance alone on an empty stage, thinking nobody was watching, that moved him. Prince stepped out of the shadows, walked onto the stage. Carlos had his eyes closed, lost in the music, and didn't notice until Prince was 3 feet away. When Carlos opened his eyes and saw Prince standing there, the color drained from his face. He ripped the headphones off. I am sorry, Mr. Nelson. I shouldn't have. Prince held up a hand. How long have you been dancing? Carlos stammered. I used to a long time ago, but I am just the janitor. I wasn't. That is not what I asked. How long have you been dancing? Since I was 15, but I haven't, not professionally, Prince smiled. Not the stage smile, the real one. You dance better than me. Carlos blinked. What? You heard me? You've got something most of the dancers I hire don't have. You dance like you need it, like it is not a job, like it is breathing. Carlos didn't know what to say. Prince Rogers Nelson was standing on stage at 2 a.m. telling him he danced well. "What is your name?" Prince asked. Carlos Rivera." Prince extended his hand. "Nice to meet you, Carlos. How would you feel about dancing with me?" "I don't understand. I want to see what you can do. No pressure, just you, me, and whatever music we make. You interested?" Carlos looked at Prince like he was speaking a foreign language. "You want to dance with me now? It is 2 a.m., Prince laughed. "Best time to create is when everyone else is sleeping. So what do you say? Want to try something together?" Carlos's mouth opened, closed, opened again. Finally, he nodded. "Yeah, yes, absolutely." Prince walked to the sound booth. "Let me set something up. You just keep doing what you were doing." Prince disappeared into the control room. A moment later, music filled the stage, not cream this time, but something new, a beat. Sparse at first, just drums and bass, building slowly. "Follow the rhythm." Prince called out. "Don't think, just feel it." Carlos started moving, tentative at first, unsure if this was really happening. But as the music built, his body took over. He fell into the rhythm like coming home. Prince added a keyboard line, then guitar, layering sounds in real time, watching Carlos move, adjusting the music to match his energy. Then Prince stepped out of the control room with a microphone. He started singing, improvising lyrics about movement and freedom and the night, his voice weaving through the beat like a conversation. Carlos spun. Prince echoed the movement with his voice. Carlos dropped low. Prince's voice went deep. They were communicating without words, two people speaking the language of music and motion. Have you ever watched two strangers connect through art? The way music becomes a bridge between souls, erasing differences like job titles and fame. That is what happened on that stage at 2 a.m. Share this story if you believe creativity belongs to everyone, because sometimes the most powerful art happens when we stop performing for others and start creating with them. What started as a simple dance became something more. Prince kept adding layers to the music. Carlos kept dancing, but now he was also suggesting rhythms with his movements. Sharp stops that made Prince add drum hits, flowing sequences that made Prince extend the melody. They weren't performer and janitor anymore. They were collaborators, partners in creation. An hour passed. Then, too, neither of them noticed. Prince would try something on the keyboard. Carlos would respond with his body, and the music would evolve. They barely spoke, didn't need to. The communication was happening on a level deeper than words. At one point, Prince stopped playing and just watched Carlos dance to the beat. "Where did you learn to move like that?" "Bronx, mostly. Block parties, clubs, anywhere I could." "Why'd you stop?" Carlos hesitated. "Life, got hurt. Needed money. Dancing doesn't pay bills." Prince nodded. "I get that. But you are still dancing inside, aren't you? Even when you are mopping floors." "Every day. Music's always playing in my head." Prince walked over to Carlos. "I am going to tell you something. Most people think talent is about training or connections or luck. But the real talent, the thing that matters, is need. You need to dance the way you need to breathe. That is rare. Don't waste it." Carlos felt something crack open inside his chest. Nobody had ever said anything like that to him. Nobody had ever seen him that way. "Let's try something," Prince said. "I am going to record this, not for an album, just for us, so we remember this night. Cool?" Carlos nodded, not trusting himself to speak. Prince went back to the control booth and hit record. They played for another hour, Prince building soundscapes, Carlos painting pictures with his body, creating something that existed only for them in that moment at 3 a.m. in an empty building. When they finally stopped, it was 5 a.m. The sun was starting to rise outside Paisley Park's windows. Carlos's shirt was soaked with sweat. Prince looked energized in a way he hadn't felt in months. "That was incredible," Prince said. "You have real talent, Carlos." "Thank you. I don't even know how to describe this, best night of my life." Prince smiled. "Mine too. Listen, I have a proposal. How would you feel about working here? Not as a janitor, as part of my creative team." Carlos stared. What? I need people around me who understand movement, who feel music the way you do. I don't care if you haven't been trained professionally. You've got something these choreographers I hire don't have. You've got soul. I don't know what to say. Say yes. Come in a few days a week. Work with the dancers. Teach them what you know, and keep creating because the world needs to see what you can do. Carlos's eyes filled with tears. You are serious? Dead serious. You've been cleaning my stage for 6 months. It is time you performed on it. Prince kept his word. Carlos started working at Paisley Park as an assistant choreographer. He learned the technical side of dance he'd never been taught, studied under professionals. But more than that, he taught them what Prince had seen in him that night, how to dance with need, not just precision. The recording from their 2 a.m. jam session sat in Paisley Park's vault for years. Prince would occasionally listen to it privately, but he never released it. Too personal, too raw. Until 1995, Prince was finishing the Gold Experience album. He wanted to include something unexpected, something that captured the spirit of spontaneity and pure creation. He remembered that night with Carlos, pulled the recording from the vault. Listened to it again. The music they'd made at 3 a.m., Prince's improvised keys and Carlos's rhythmic movement, inspiring the beat, became the foundation for a hidden track. Prince reworked it, added production, but kept the core, that pure, unrehearsed energy of two people creating together when nobody was watching. The album went platinum. Critics called it Prince's return to form. But hidden in the final track, barely noticeable unless you were really listening, was the sound of footsteps. Carlos dancing, still there, still part of the music. Carlos didn't find out until 20 years later. In 2011, a sound engineer working on Prince's archives discovered the original tape, labeled simply 2M Sessions with Carlos, September 1991. The engineer called Carlos. Did you know Prince used your session on Gold Experience? Carlos had no idea. He'd thought that night was just between them, a private memory. But Prince had immortalized it, hidden it in plain sight where millions heard it without knowing the story behind it. Today, Carlos Rivera is the head choreographer for the Prince estate. He oversees dance performances at Paisley Park, trains new performers, and preserves Prince's movement legacy. But if you ask him about his career, he always starts with the same story. The night at 2 a.m. when Prince caught him dancing alone. I thought I was going to get fired, Carlos says with a laugh. Instead, I got a life. Carlos's office at Paisley Park is filled with memories, photos from tours, choreography notes, a gold record from the Gold Experience hanging on the wall. But the most treasured item is a cassette tape in a purple case. The original recording from that September night in 1991. Prince gave it to me in 2015, a year before he died, Carlos explains. He said, "This belongs to you. Your movement is on this tape. Your spirit, don't forget where you came from." After Prince's death in 2016, Carlos found a letter in his Paisley Park locker, written in Prince's handwriting, dated just 2 weeks before he died. The letter said, "Carlos, that night I saw you dancing alone taught me something I'd forgotten. That the stage doesn't belong to the famous. It belongs to anyone who needs it. You reminded me that music isn't about perfection. It is about truth. Keep teaching that. Keep dancing like nobody's watching, because that is when you are most honest." Carlos keeps the letter in his wallet, reads it whenever he doubts himself. Carlos's story has inspired a program at Paisley Park called After Hours Sessions. Once a month, the estate opens the studio late at night for aspiring dancers and musicians who work day jobs. Janitors, teachers, nurses, people who dream of creating but never had the platform. They come to Paisley Park at midnight, use the same stage where Prince performed, create freely, without judgment, without the pressure of industry professionals watching. Just pure art for art's sake. Prince taught me the stage belongs to everyone, Carlos says. Now I am teaching that to others. Maya Thompson is a nurse who attended one of the after-hours sessions. "I've been writing songs since I was 12 but never shared them with anyone," she says. coming to Paisley Park at 2 a.m., sitting at Prince's piano, singing my songs. It changed me. I am not trying to be famous, I just needed to know my art mattered. That is the legacy of that September night. Not just what happened to Carlos, but the principle Prince demonstrated. Creativity isn't exclusive. Talent isn't reserved for professionals. The stage is for anyone who needs it. If you've ever created something in private, afraid to share it with the world, this story is for you. Share it with someone who needs permission to be an artist. Because sometimes, the most important thing we can do is dance like nobody's watching, even if someone is. Carlos now trains professional dancers for major productions, but he starts every class the same way. He tells them about Prince catching him, dancing alone. Then he says this: Prince could have laughed. He could have fired me. He could have reminded me I was the janitor and he was the legend. Instead, he saw a person who loved music, and he treated me like an equal. That is what greatness looks like, not the performance, the humanity. Carlos teaches his students that dance isn't about being perfect. It is about being present, about showing up with your whole self, your history, your pain, your joy, and moving honestly. Stop dancing for applause, he tells them. Dance because you need to. Dance like you are alone on a stage at 2 a.m. with nothing to prove. That is when you are most powerful. His students have gone on to perform with Beyonce, choreograph for major films, open their own studios, and they all credit Carlos with teaching them something technique alone couldn't: authenticity. Carlos taught me that the best dancers aren't the ones with the most training, says Jennifer Liu, now a choreographer for Broadway. They're the ones who remember why they started dancing in the first place, because they needed to. In 2019, the Prince estate released a compilation of unreleased tracks called Originals. Hidden among them was a song titled simply 2 AM. The production was minimal: keys, bass, drums, and something else. Footsteps, rhythmic, purposeful footsteps that drove the entire beat. Fans wondered what the footsteps were. Some thought it was a percussion technique. Others thought it was symbolic. But Carlos knew. Those were his footsteps, his dance. Still there, 30 years later, still part of Prince's music. The album notes included a brief mention: 2AM features improvised movement by Carlos Rivera, recorded during a spontaneous late-night session at Paisley Park. Carlos didn't want credit originally, but the estate insisted, "Your contribution matters." They told him, "People need to know this story." When 2AM dropped, Carlos received messages from around the world, other janitors, other people working jobs they thought were dead ends. They all said the same thing: if you can go from mopping floors to making music with Prince, maybe I can chase my dream too. That is the power of one story, one moment of recognition, one person deciding that someone else's dream matters. Here is what most people don't understand about Prince seeing Carlos dance. It wasn't an accident. Prince had noticed Carlos before, seen him moving to music while he cleaned, humming along to rehearsals. Prince knew Carlos was a dancer before Carlos did. Gilbert Davidson, Prince's former manager, confirmed this years later. Prince had a gift for seeing people, really seeing them. He'd watch the crew, the security, the people everyone else overlooked. And when he saw someone with talent or passion, he found ways to help them, usually quietly, usually in ways nobody knew about. That night at 2 a.m. wasn't random. Prince came back for his notebook, but he also came back because he'd seen Carlos earlier that day moving differently while he worked, like he was dancing even when he was cleaning. Prince wanted to see what Carlos would do when he thought nobody was watching. Prince set up that moment, Davidson explains. He wanted to catch Carlos being himself, because that is when you see who someone really is, when they think nobody's looking. So Prince left the Walkman, made sure Cream was queued up, left the stage accessible, then came back to watch. That is how Prince operated, Davidson says. He didn't wait for talent to audition. He went looking for it in places nobody else thought to search. The 14th of September, 1991, 2 a.m. A janitor dancing alone on an empty stage, a legend watching from the shadows, a 3-hour jam session that nobody was supposed to know about. That night changed Carlos's life, gave him a career, gave him purpose. But it also changed Prince, reminded him why he made music. Not for the charts or the fame or the critics, for the Carlos Riveras of the world, the people who need music like oxygen. At 2 a.m., Prince caught his janitor dancing alone on stage. He could have fired him. Instead, he joined him, and they created music that ended up on a platinum album. But this story isn't really about the music. It is about what happens when we see people for who they really are, not what they do for a living. Prince taught Carlos that the stage belongs to anyone who needs it, that creativity isn't exclusive, that a job title doesn't define your worth as an artist. Today, Carlos teaches that lesson to hundreds of dancers. The after-hours sessions at Paisley Park have given stage time to thousands of people who thought their dreams were dead. Teachers, nurses, janitors, people who create in secret because they think nobody cares. Prince showed me that somebody always cares, Carlos says, even if it is just one person watching from the shadows. That is enough. That is everything. The recording from that night lives on in the Gold Experience album. Millions have heard it without knowing the story. But now you know. Now you understand that those footsteps in the track belong to a janitor who danced like nobody was watching, except Prince was watching. And he saw greatness. The music industry remembers Prince for his genius, his innovation, his legendary performances. But the people who worked at Paisley Park remember something else. They remember how he treated the crew like family, how he saw talent in unlikely places, how he believed the stage belonged to everyone. Carlos Rivera says it best. Prince didn't save my life that night. He reminded me I was allowed to have one, that I didn't have to choose between paying bills and chasing dreams, that I could be a janitor and a dancer, that both were worthy, that I was worthy. That is the real legacy of that 2 a.m. jam session, not the hidden track or the career it launched, but the principle it embodied. Everyone deserves a stage. Everyone deserves to be seen. And greatness isn't about how high you rise. It is about who you lift on the way up. 30 years later, Carlos still dances at 2 a.m. sometimes. In his living room, in empty studios, anywhere he can move freely. And every time, he remembers the night Prince stepped out of the shadows and changed everything. Dance like nobody's watching, Carlos tells his students, but also remember somebody might be watching. And if they're the right person, that moment could change your life. Prince was the right person. That was the right moment. And the world is better because one legend decided a janitor's dream mattered. The stage is for everyone. Prince proved it. Carlos lives it. And now it is our job to remember it. Because somewhere right now someone is dancing alone, thinking nobody cares. And they need to know somebody cares. Your art matters. Your dream is valid, and you deserve your moment on that stage. Even if it is 2 a.m., even if you are alone, even if you think nobody's watching. Dance anyway,